Carl Ja. Let me bring him to the stage. The man himself. How you doing, Carl? You doing okay this evening for you?
How
Evening.
how are you, Jamar?
I'm doing well, man. Better that you were with me. And for the audience to know, by the way, just Carl Ja. Carl Ja is host of Silk and Steel podcast focused on China and surrounding regions, their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Shah. You can follow his podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk with the letter N. And you can subscribe to support the podcast on patreon.com/silk and steel. Carl, the reason that I hit you up is because obviously I read on subjects all across the world just because the show focuses on stuff all across the world. And I came across this thing about the US getting far more engaged in the Philippines with obviously drone warfare and these type of things. The reason this perked my interest was because drones seem to be the new super weapon. And I don't mean it in the sense of like a nuke. I mean it in the sense of the ability to tie down militaries, the ability to deter people going into certain areas, the ability to hit, let's say, people. Like, for example, Israel right now is being chewed alive by Hezbollah. Apparently, 5 were killed, and I mentioned several tanks blown up and everything else in attacks that Hezbollah ran. Hezbollah has been able to hit them at night and during the daytime. And you've had Israelis bitching in the United Nations. When we're invading and trying to kill women and children, they're killing us with drones. This is unfair. Right? Like, meaning a military that is funded to the tune of billions against a resistance force is on some level being tied down when they are going on the ground. Drones is a new device, even in Ukraine. Ukrainians are, obviously the Russians are advancing, but Ukrainian and their loss of manpower, drones are making up the gap on some level. The US is basically integrating the Philippines with additional armaments and drone warfare. This is on top of this Philippines-Japan corridor that they're trying to create, which again is aimed directly at China and this notion of controlling certain parts of the ocean. Give me your take on this in general. I mean, like, this, I know China has this belief, and we can talk about it if you want, of if nothing changes, we would just sail into the future and the world will be fantastic. The US doesn't believe that. Should China have a bit of concern?
Okay, so it's really. I was waiting for your question, but it's really you're just giving me like a. It's just very general. You're just asking me my take on a very general happening. I mean, like, this is nothing new, right? I mean, it's for drones itself. Drones is now an essential part of the 21st century warfare, as we have seen in the Ukraine war, which is, the Ukraine war and the latest Persian Gulf War is really the only real 21st century war that we know. And what drones enable the combatants do is to wage asymmetric warfare. No longer you can use very cheaply made assembled drones to go against opponents who are much more powerful, much more have like $1 billion worth of equipments, right? So this is a reality all countries are adjusting to, including the United States. Now, Philippines. Well, Philippines has always been the linchpin of the U.S. strategy to contain China. Again, that's nothing new. And what is new is in the aftermath of the recently just concluded war in Persian Gulf, when the U.S. empire has been exposed as paper tiger that it is. I mean, this is why the MOU was signed in Versailles. It's a document of surrender. This is unambiguous Iranian victory. In light of this, a lot of countries are now making adjustment. Because it destroys the premises that U.S. is going to come to your aid. U.S. got your back. U.S. have a security umbrella that will protect you. All that assumption has been blown to pieces by Iranian drones and missiles. And Philippines is exception to that.
Right.
Because every other country, whether South Korea or they're all they're secretly going back to the drawing boards, because we're now anticipating a new security arrangement in the aftermath of Trump's surrender to Iran. Philippines, though, it's special in a way, because first of all, Philippines was a U.S. colony until World War II, and some argue it's still very much a U.S. colony. And the Philippines also have it's a Filipino society is more like Latin America than East Asia. What I mean is you have these small oligarchs who rule these vast masses who they absolutely care nothing about. But this small group of oligarchs control a lot of national sources, and they fight among themselves. And this is what's happening in the Philippines right now. Like last time when I was on the show, I told you about the gunfight in the Filipino Senate, which apparently a lot of people didn't even hear about, because this domestic issues. The Filipino president Bongbong Marcos very much like to have a distraction. That distraction, tension with China do serve as a distraction from the Filipino public, who are also very concerned about the rising prices. The developing nations in the global south, they're getting hit. They're getting hit particularly hard by the recent energy disruption, the disruption in the energy supply chain, because the rich countries can always outbid the poor country in the global oil market. You're never going to have real shortages in places like the first world countries like United States, Europe, Japan, because they have the money. They have the money to outbid the poor countries for the limited hydrocarbon resources. Philippines, right. Indonesia, where I'm right now, are getting squeezed really hard because they can't really afford this increasing the fuel prices. Energy is at the basis of everything. Its basis of the economy is energy, and both Philippines and Indonesia both are net energy importers. Particularly Philippines. Indonesia at least produce some oil. Indonesia produce about 600 barrels of oil per day. But the problem is Indonesia consumes 1.6 million barrels of oil per day. So Indonesia actually had to import 1 million barrels of oil. But Philippines produce very little oil. So it imports vast majority of its oil from abroad, from Persian Gulf regions. And when the Strait of Hormuz was closed, right now they're talking about opening the Strait of Hormuz, but that's going to take time. I mean, like to return to the pre-war level of the maritime traffic, it's going to take at least a year. That's assuming everything goes according to the plan. It's going to take at least a year. At least a year to restore production and to get the ship the containers to go back to the Persian Gulf, and to have the war insurance to come down, because right now the war insurance rate means each VLCC tanker is going to have to pay additional $10 million in war insurance for going to the Persian Gulf. That's not a small sum of change. So a lot of these countries, Philippines, Indonesia, India, they're all getting hit very hard at the moment. That's why their currency also depreciating versus the U.S. dollars. It's a double whammy, and so this is what the Filipino voters would like to know. Okay, Bongbong Marcos, how are you going to solve our problem? Bongbong Marcos, like, well, the best I can do is we're going to pick a fight with China. And
I see.
It serve as a distraction, right? Nationalism is what some famous guy said, nationalism is a refugee of the scoundrels, because you can always use nationalism to distract the public from other pressing issues, like how are we going to afford our transportation fees? How the farmers going to afford their diesel for their tractors? How the farmers going to get their fertilizers? We serious issues. But this is the reason the Filipino elite is choosing to be persistent in their path to serve as, U.S. palm in East Asia, to even be a Ukraine in East Asia if needs be, right? Which is itself is on a very dangerous path. So I don't think that will end anytime soon. But the silver lining, though, with the U.S. defeat, it is a U.S. defeat in West Asia, is that there is probably very less likely possibility now of another kinetic action in East Asia, because we already seen U.S. can't even do anything about Iranian control of Strait of Hormuz. Like forget about going head to head with China. So in that way, U.S. will never give up to use proxies to contain China, like what they're doing with the Philippines. This is, again, it's nothing new. I mean, you need a historical perspective on things, Jamar. Back in 1970s, when I was born, I was born in 1976, but just before that, before U.S. pulling out of Vietnam, during Vietnam War, the entire South China Sea was American lake. U.S. had military bases in the Philippines, in Vietnam, in Singapore, all around South China Sea, right? Now, United States have to do this farcical freedom of navigation patrol in South China Sea just to have a show of presence, to see, hey, we're still here. We haven't left yet. This is quite different from back in 1970s when U.S. had troops all around the South China Sea, and the U.S. aircraft. There was two U.S. aircraft carrier group, the Station Yankee and Station Dixie, that was permanently stationed in South China Sea. Right, like now they just do, like, now the U.S. aircraft carrier group even rarely traverse through South China Sea anymore. They also avoid Strait of Taiwan if possible. So if you have that perspective, you are seeing the U.S. is actually gradually being pushed out of East Asia. What U.S. has been fighting for the last decades or so is fighting a rearguard action to insist, no, we do have a right to be here. This is why you hear people like Pete Hegseth say, we are a Pacific power. China need to respect our right to be here. Like the thing is, China never said you don't have a right to be in California, right? Like China never said you don't have a right to be in never said you don't have a right to be in California, in Oregon. China never said that. But what United States really saying, we have a right to be in East Asia, right? And Philippines was one of the last American colony in the region. It serves that role as the linchpin of U.S. strategy to contain China. Again, the U.S., even though we're now at a period of a lull between U.S.-China relationship, it was a lull in tension as a result of recent Trump visit to Beijing. But U.S. military-industrial complex will never give up because their whole reason of existence is to manufacturing the tension to justify their own existence, so they can continually profit from the grift from being justified $1 trillion military budget. So that will never phase out, right? So like, Carl, this is why I say there's no need for alarm. This is nothing new. This is Okay, go ahead. I see your.
No. I can get that. What I'm pointing out is I get the historical context, but this is new. Like this is not. We are not in the 80s. We're not in the 70s. We're not in the 90s. This is the law of the jungle. Things have fundamentally changed on the world stage in regards to the way that the U.S.
United States got its ass butt kicked out of Vietnam in the 1970s. What more can I say? I mean, like you think that things are different? You think that the relative balance of power today favors United States versus 1970s or 1950s?
No.
United States was much more dominant back then. In the 1950s, United States alone possessed 50% of the world's manufacturing power, right? Even Joseph Stalin was a little bit wary of a direct conflict with the United States, right? That's why he had created many concessions to the United States, like East in Europe and also in East Asia. Soviet Union decided not to directly get involved in the war, for example. It backed China. It did send in Soviet pilots, but Soviet pilots had to dress in the Chinese uniform, fly in the planes painted with Chinese colors in order to enter Korea, because Soviet Union did not want to engage in a direct military confrontation with United States. And because US back then was the hyperpower of the world. And today, U.S. was just got its ass kicked in the Persian Gulf, right? I mean, like so whatever it's doing in East Asia, this is like minor nuisance. This is like not existential. This is minor nuisance.
Let's go to the memorandum of understanding then. I mean, I think this is different. It's not that I think the U.S. power.
Look. Let me phrase it another way. U.S. will never give up on its strategic goal of being the top dog, being the global hegemon. But what right now, in the face of real resource constraint, what's more likely, U.S. will rely on proxy war, on color revolution, on regime change, on like stuff that CIA does very well, like sabotage, rather than a direct military war. Because in a direct military war, U.S. will get its ass kicked. No, let's make no mistake about it. If there's a war today between U.S. and China, the U.S. empire will be gone in a couple of hours. Will be gone in a couple of hours. Yeah. So there's not gonna be that kinetic World War III scenario happening anytime soon. Well, hopefully not in our lifetime, but the U.S. will never give up on through sabotage. United States will never give up on through like the so-called hybrid warfare, right? The dirty wars, right? I mean, like this. So again, it's nothing new. I mean, U.S. have been doing this since the 1950s. Like what they're doing right now in the Philippines is not a step up. It's not a major escalation from what they have been always doing this. They're doing the same thing they have always been doing.
Carl, it's not just the Philippines, which is my point. It's a point. It's the U.S. is vulnerable. It knows it's vulnerable. It knows it's.
Did you know U.S. was U.S. No, listen, Jamar.
I listened to you. Hold on. Let me make my point. I've listened to everything you've said. The U.S. in all of those other situations didn't lose anything. It lost wars. It lost, let's say, standing or status or something like that. We're dealing now with a U.S. that knows it's vulnerable, A, knows it's receding from the standpoint as a global power, B, and has decided to get rid of the soft power stuff and go for direct military power, whether it's with Russia or, for the matter, whether it was Iran. Yes, it got its ass kicked for Iran. It is not receding from Iran in the way that people think it is, nor is it receding from China. It is just repositioning on China. I guess I'm saying we're in a different headspace. This is not the place where the U.S. is using soft power and whatnot in its operations. Yes, it's using proxies. Yes, it's using hybrid war, but it's also desperate. That's a different animal. That's not the same as the 70s and the
U.S.
80s.
have always been using hybrid war, Jamar. In the 1950s, CIA were flying planes out of Taiwan to bomb oil fields in Indonesia. Like,
Yes.
I mean, I'm telling you, there was much more bloodshed back then. There's much more havoc, and they had much more capability to wreak havoc back then than they do today. So this is why I'm not pessimistic at all. I mean, I'm quite optimistic because compared to 1950s, today it's very clear the relative decline of the U.S. power. It's not what we just had in the West Asia. That was a Suez Canal moment for the United States. Suez Canal crisis in the 1950s. That signaled the beginning of an end for the British and French Empire. Because they failed to impose. They failed to seize the Suez Canal from Egypt. Well, what we just had right now when Trump put his sign on the surrender document in Versailles of all places, that was a Suez moment for U.S. empire. Like this is the beginning of an end. I mean, it's not the end. It's not the end, but it's the beginning of the end. The pathway is not going to be smooth. It's in fact probably going to be very turbulent and bloody because, as you said, the empire, they will strike back. They will lash out. That's to be expected. The polar world that doesn't mean necessarily everybody holding hands and sing kumbaya around the fireplace, but it's gonna the transition. It will not be smooth. In fact, it is fraught with danger because now we're transitioning into a different international system. Now it's still kind of unknown for a lot of the players. People are still trying to find their place, but I mean, there's no reason to be pessimistic about it. That's all I'm saying.
That's fair, and it's. I think my feeling is we're sleepwalking into a war. That's my feeling. And I base that on, if you look back at World War I and you look at all of the players, all of those things were like separate conflicts, even though they ultimately ended up being in one conflict. And when I look at the world, I see the US effectively delegating responsibilities and then bitching at the people to push for those responsibilities, meaning, hey, Philippines, Japan, South Korea, we need you to deal with the China issue. Oh, and right, Australia, we need you to, die for America. And Europe, we need you to boost your military so you can fight the Russians. And the Israelis, we need you to fight meaning all of these wars are happening now. And the only reason China is not at war is because the United States is not completely insane. Right?
Well, so I would say the only reason China is not at war because China has nukes. And China have delivery capability to send those nukes to the U.S. cities. That's why. I mean, if Iran had nukes and if Iran had ballistic missiles that could level New York and Los Angeles, we would not have this war. We would not have had this war.
By the way, how does China see the MOU? Have they made mention? I've seen in some publications that they were talking about basically, hey, we will help you develop, we will help you rebuild. Will invest, those type of things. And I saw the Iranian.
I don't know if you saw the Iranian foreign minister actually tweeted out. He said, like, we're not going to bring the Iran-China leadership, the relationship to the forefront. I guess something must have discussed when he went to Beijing to meet with Chinese foreign minister Wang Yi. There must be some kind of understanding that was reached. Like they haven't made public yet, but the Iranian side are now very forthright in saying, we look forward to build a new security structure with China. And this is pretty big. This is pretty big. And also with lift of sanctions, more directly, with lift of the sanctions, that means there will be a lot more Chinese business, Chinese investment going to Iran. Because what people don't realize, even though a lot of sanctions are unilateral sanctions by United States, but a lot of times the U.S. sanctions serve as a global sanction, because when U.S. place secondary sanctions, they will sanction anybody who will do business in Iran. That's how they got Huawei's CFO. And this is why China recently have to issue an order to domestic Chinese companies: you must not obey U.S. sanction to sanction one of our oil refiners, right? So, but with the lifting of the sanction, now, all the Chinese businesses are free to do investment, to bring investment into Iran. So I do see there's going to be a boom of business, and for even though Iran is a partner of the BRI, because of the sanctions, it has been starved of the fund. A lot of the Chinese businesses, especially private Chinese businesses, are scared to go in because for the fear that they will be sanctioned by the United States. They saw what they did to Huawei CFO. That was to serve as example to the other Chinese businesses that were thinking about sanction busting. So now with the sanction lifted, Iran can be a full-fledged member in the Belt and Road Initiative, and I expect there's going to be a lot of investment, and Iran can leverage its very important strategic location, in the middle of the Eurasia, and with much Chinese, they can look forward to much Chinese investment in roads, railroads, ports, all kind of infrastructures.
Do you expect this, from your point of view, in looking at this, is the MOU, obviously it's a surrender document. Right? I don't know how anybody could spin it otherwise. But it's being violated even now as we speak, immediately. So I guess my thing is there any belief that this stuff ever gets enacted in real terms from your point of view?
Well, I mean, the proof is in the pudding, right? We'll have to see within the next 60 days. But as for China's role, China obviously played a pivotal role. There's a reason they chose Pakistan as a place of negotiation, because Pakistan has provided unique value where Pakistan has very good relationship with GCC. They have good relationship with Iran. They have good relationship with United States, and they have good relationship with China. Right. So that's why it was a middle ground for both sides to meet. And, China obviously was playing a big role behind the scenes together with Pakistan to set the table for negotiation, because China also very much want to see the Strait of Hormuz to open again. So I mean, all in all, China must be very happy about this MOU. It is a complete American surrender, lifting U.S. sanction against Iran, unfreezing Iranian asset, pulling out a U.S. military asset from the region, and this again will allow Chinese investment to pour into Iran. Then you have the statement from Iranian official, like Iranian prime minister: we are going to work closely with China to blaze ahead our partnership.
One last question: if the U.S. and Iran do come to some kind of terms in the future, whenever that future happens, would China give security guarantees to this? And by the way, when I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking of this in Russia and China giving security guarantees in regards to no new attacks on its territory, those type of things. Because this deal is going to go through the UN Security Council. That's assuming the deal is ever generated. Would this, and the reason why I'm putting this out, so in the JCPOA, you had all of these European actors who effectively lumped in on the deal. None of them maintained the deal at the point where the US effectively violated when Trump shot it in the face and just destroyed the JCPOA. Instead, what Europe did was turn around and said, Iran better stay with the deal that the United States is no longer working with. If Iran wanted security guarantees from China and Russia on this, do you think they would ever entangle themselves into something like this?
Well, we have to
I know that's a hard
security
question.
guarantee is
And
a
you may
very broad
just say, I
term.
don't know.
Security guarantee
Yeah.
is a very broad term. What does that mean? Will China nuke Washington if Trump does not uphold his end of the bargain? What I think Iran, though, they do have a very strong leverage. They can just close the Strait of Hormuz again. That is their very strong leverage. It's almost equivalent of an economic nuke.
Yes.
They have the ability to close and open at will, and there's nothing United States can do to challenge Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz. I think what Iran would look for is some closer cooperation with China and Russia in terms of national security. We're probably going to talk about like maybe technological transfers, some maybe shared weapon platform, stuff like that. And I can see that happening. They can. Iran was originally trying to source some Russian fighters anyway. So I think the military cooperation will probably continue and deepen. But I don't know. I mean, they might be looking for some kind of create some kind of new security arrangement for West Asia. But again, we don't know what kind of form that will take. Iran, Russia, and China were doing joint naval drills before the war started. But again, it sends a message. But again, we didn't necessarily see Russian and Chinese warship rushing to the Persian Gulf. So we'll just have to wait and see. I'm sure something is being hammered out behind the scenes. Otherwise, the Iranian foreign minister wouldn't be making such open statement on X about
Agreed.
So
no, I totally agree. Carl, you are awesome, and I appreciate the breakdown. And by the way, I understand where you're coming from. It's like, okay, dude, all of this stuff is not necessarily new. I agree with you. It's not that I think that what they're doing is new. It's the way they're acting is new, if that makes sense. They seem far more desperate than what they were prior. And that desperation has led to, they've never attacked Iran directly like this. Even back then, they used Iraq to do it. And even with the Russia stuff, they would have never did this shit in the Soviet Union. And yet, Russia is under attack as we speak. This is a new level of desperation. That's all I'm pointing out. It's not that I think this stuff is radically different in the sense of tone. No. In the sense of action, I think it's different in the sense of tone, if that makes sense. But let me give you your thing. Carl Jha is, if I can pull this up, there we are. Carl Jha, he's host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions, their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk letter N, and you can subscribe and support his podcast on patreon.com/Silk and Steel. Carl, you have a fantastic rest of your night, man. Thank you for this. You be safe, okay?
Thank you, Jabbar. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. We have come to the end. Shout out to Carl.